In training with Bruce, it was very interesting because, again, we use the word art. To me, fighting was you just leaped in there, you took the punches, and you punched hoping that you would take him down. Or, in other words, it was very physical. It really wasn't an art. But with Bruce, everything he did could be explained and identified for being practical. In other words, again, the trapping part. Why trap? Well, the trapping was to control my hands so that I couldn't do anything offensive or defensive against him. The movement of Bruce was so interesting because he was like a bad smell. You couldn't get rid of him. Once he was on you and you backed away and tried to get away, you couldn't because he was constantly creating pressure against you. No matter how you moved your hands trying to escape, you couldn't do it. He just stayed with you, but at the same time, he could hit you. And this just was phenomenal to me because I had never experienced that sort of counter. No one had ever done that to me. And so this was my introduction to the art, the true art and science of fighting. However, what was different about Bruce compared, and later on, I understood this. What was so different about Bruce was Bruce did not follow traditional, structured training and application. You had many Kung Fu styles, and each one of these fought in a particular way, very religiously, very traditionally. And Bruce, of course, originally fought with Wing Chun, which was mainly a trapping and very soft but very aggressive style as far as movement. And he was very traditional in the beginning. But when he came to the United States, he found it very interesting going against bigger and stronger Americans that they didn't react like the encounters he had in Hong Kong. He found that even though he could effectively stop us, we still were trying to come. We were still trying to hit. We were still being very physical. And this bothered Bruce because a lot of the basic techniques he had really didn't work well against us because of our aggression and our strength. The basic trapping was good, but as soon as we started picking up a little bit about trapping ourselves, he started to have some problems. So he began to realize that he was going to have to change something in order to be able to adjust to the kind of fighting that he had encountered in the United States. So this is where he backed away from his traditional thinking and he began to really question different styles, different applications of training, different ways to look at training. And this is where, to me, he began to revolutionize the whole concept of martial arts because he began to challenge basic martial arts. Rather than to do it because the masters have done it for 400 years, he realized that it didn't matter if it worked for the masters or if it was around for 400 years. If it didn't work for him, it was pointless. It was just entertainment. So he began to become very selfish in the way he trained, and he surrounded himself with people who had different fighting skills. Guys who were just very like a gorilla or a water buffalo, very physical. Other people who had, say, karate background or boxing background or some background that allowed him to be able to study the kind of encounters that he may run across. He would ask, for instance, if I did this, what would you do? He would always ask questions regardless of the style because he found that if he talked to different people, he got different answers. Tall people, short people, heavy people, slow people, fast people. And this is what fascinated me about Bruce. As I watched him, I began to see that he analyzed everything very carefully in how it applied to him as Bruce Lee. This is where it was so different in later martial arts when I began to look at other styles and how they trained. Everybody just followed the instructor. Nobody questioned it. No one was allowed to question it. Whereas Bruce wanted you to question him. He wanted you to challenge him so that he could analyze your challenge, look and see if there was a weakness in what he was doing and how he could fix it. And this was very, very unique because You just never saw that in martial arts. Everybody had to follow the tradition, the classical. Boxing had certain things that it did traditionally. Jabs, combinations, bobbing and weaving, certain footwork. Karate, same thing. Jiu-jitsu, all of them followed exactly what it was that was given to them by the instructor or was accepted as traditional ways. And again, although Bruce originally was that way, he very quickly began to change so that he allowed people to understand that it was okay to question, it was okay to challenge the instructor, because you had to understand, why were you doing this in the first place? Or you were doing it for yourself, especially if you were doing it for self-defense. Now, and I should qualify that. Bruce's attitude was, if you were doing it for the art, it didn't matter. Because of the beauty of the art, maybe for health, like Tai Chi, the form, the flow. But if you were doing it for self-defense, then you had to stop and say, wait a minute, I must question everything because I need to know whether it'll work for me. Just because it works for my instructor or the other students, it didn't matter. If it didn't work for me, it was entertainment. And this was a very, very important part of Bruce's training, because his whole dream was to one day become a famous movie actor. Go to Hollywood and become an actor. Because he had been for 17 years a child actor in Hong Kong. But he wanted to become an actor in America. And he knew that this would be very difficult unless he had something special to offer. Well, Bruce had nothing to offer. He didn't have any skills or talents or any way to get into the movies except through martial arts. So he realized that in order to be able to have something that attracted Hollywood, he had to be able to be exceptionally good at martial arts. And so all of his training was not to become really truly the best fighter in the world, because hell, over here we shoot you. We don't do this hand-to-hand combat, and Bruce knew that. But he knew that if he was amazing in his speed and his ability to shut people down and do technique, that this would be very appealing as a potential way to get into Hollywood. And I remember this very clearly, because I know that all of his talk, all of his effort was to get good and better at his ability to perform, to be able to show people how effective he could move, how effective he was. But yet I knew it wasn't because he wanted to become the best fighter. And yet everybody was left with that impression that Bruce Lee, the fighter, wanted to be the best. Yes, but in reality it was to be the best so that he would have something that would impress Hollywood. And of course it went on to be true, it did impress him. But at the same time, my interest in Bruce Lee, my fascination with Bruce Lee was not his ability to fight. His ability to fight was, without question, very unique. What impressed me was the way his brain worked, how he questioned things, the science. He was suddenly bringing in the science of martial arts. No longer did he think things were accepted because the instructor said it. He would analyze and break it down. If he talked about, okay, if I did this and you did that and I counted you to do this, what would you do? And his brain would think like this. And this is where I began to think in terms of, well, wait a minute, what do I do when I train? Do I question it? As a rule, no. I just follow along basically what I was taught. But when I stepped back and I looked at Bruce and I began to say, why was this kid so good? Why was this kid able to shut me down no matter how fast and aggressive I was? How did he look at speed and power compared to how I looked at it? I looked at it as just practice moving faster, practice moving harder, stronger, being more kinetic. Bruce didn't look at it that way. Bruce looked at it in a more scientific way. What was speed? What was power? And then he decided, well, one of the problems is it's all one big glob of training. But that was a mistake, because you can't train in all these things at the same time and really get good. What you're looking at is art is an art, speed is an art by itself. So focus on how to become faster. What is speed? What type of speed? Do you want speed of reaction, speed of motion? What is speed in itself? Your mental speed, your ability to interpret what somebody is doing or going to do. The kinetic speed. Speed of reaction speed, for instance, in the startle. The pure speed. His brain just worked this way. He would be going on and on and on asking these questions. Power. What do we mean by power? Kinetic power, built like a gorilla? Or, the biomechanics of power and how to align the joints so that you had structural power and were able to transfer energy. The ability to absorb energy, to be soft and flow versus the ability to be explosive like dynamite. This is what fascinated me about Bruce. It's just the way he was always asking questions. He was always trying to interpret how to do something better. And this is where I think was the revolutionary change that began to change martial arts, because it began to influence other people who came around him in their styles. And they began to question more about how they were working on things. And this is what led Bruce to being able to think in terms of, well, wait a minute, how can I become the best I could be? And what do I need to do it? And this is where he began to move into the thinking of terms of timers, or anything at all that would challenge him.